This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we're talking, as always, with our friend Fausta Rodriguez Wertz. She's the editor of Fausta's blog. She does a great job as the editor of Fausta's blog, recollecting and telling us about what is happening in Latin America. Fausta, let's talk about three big stories in Latin America this week: Venezuela, Argentina, and Brazil. I wrote a little post over at the American Thinker this morning about the president of Brazil, Mr. Temer, and I was asking in this article if there are any honest politicians in Brazil, because it seems every one of them is under a cloud, whether it's Mr. Lula, whether it's Mr. Temer, and of course the one who was impeached last year. And it's really a tense situation. Now you're reporting in your blog that Mr. Lula, well, you reported two things about Mr. Lula. One is that he was given a $5 million, I guess, I don't even know what to call it, donation, if that's the right word, from Mr. Odebrecht. And the other thing you're reporting is that Mr. Lula wants to run for president again. So does it get any crazier in Brazil, Fausta?
Well, I'm sure it can get crazier. I mean, but here's what happened. As we know, this is like like they do in TV programs when they start, and they show you scenes from the prior episode. The guy who was in charge of Odebrecht, who is the grandson of the guy who actually founded Odebrecht in 1944, gave some documents to the judge in charge of the car wash trial for the guy who used to be Dilma's right-hand man. So the guy who was Dilma's right-hand man is under trial. Odebrecht, Mr. Odebrecht, who is serving a 15-year sentence, handed out documents showing that he actually that the company actually paid bribes. So this is full documentation from the original source. Odebrecht did this because apparently he's trying to plea for a shorter sentence. So one of the things that the documents revealed was that Odebrecht paid, through the guy who is being tried, close to $5 million directly to Lula. The other thing that came up, and this was in the Wall Street Journal today, is that, I'm going to read from the Wall Street Journal. The article is called Brazil President Michel Temer allegedly linked to $40 million bribe. So the Brazilian President Michel Temer held a meeting in 2010 where a former executive at a construction company, Odebrecht S.A., said he agreed to pay a $40 million bribe to Mr. Temer's PMDB party in exchange for a construction contract. Now, this is linking Temer directly to the bribery scandal. So there's testimony from another former Odebrecht employee saying that that the bribe amounted to 5% of the contract awarded by Petrobras to the company. It was paid in cash for some part, and in some other part was paid to offshore accounts. Now, for the Lula thing, Lula was paid directly, even when the funds where the transaction was carried through a third person. But Sabrina Martin in Pan Am Post said that Lula is under investigation in connection with the Lava Jato operation. One investigation is allegedly claiming that the payments were made for former Petrobras director Silence. Another one is Operation Celotes, the framework that covered companies that did not pay taxes, as well as an investigation into influence peddling. And finally, for money laundering, which allegedly included an apartment on the coast of Sao Paulo as one of the inducements. Likewise, as if that were not enough, Lula is accused of participating in the project of rerouting between 2% and 3% of the value of the contract signed between state-owned Petrobras and the construction company Odebrecht. So Lula, when this came out, gave a couple of interviews. One of them was to O Globo, and the other one was to a radio station called, I forget what it was called, Medio Norte. And Lula said that, well, not only is this not true, of course he's going to deny it, he's not stupid. He said that what the country needs is to find its way to be happy again and to live democratically. And of course, if the Partidos Trabajadores, the Workers' Party, it needs me, I'm ready to run for president again. So that's where Lula stands in the whole thing. Meanwhile, his family, I mean,
too good to be true, Fausta.
Lifetime on corruption-related charges just like last year alone, and that doesn't count the evidence that was presented, any new charges, and the indictments against not only his children and his wife, but also his associates. So this is beyond belief.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You know, that you couldn't write, if you were writing a political comedy, you couldn't do better than Brazil's real politics. I mean, it is just remarkable what goes on in that amazing country, which is, of course, the importance of Brazil. It's one of the top 10 GDPs in the world. So, I mean, it actually happens to be very important, not just for us here in the United States, but for the region itself. It often pushes a lot of other economies. And I think at the bottom, Fausta, as we've talked before, at the bottom of all of this is the fact that the Brazilian economy has been underperforming very poorly here for the last couple of years, very bad GDP and so on. So that's probably driving a lot of this dissatisfaction in the country. Now let's go to Argentina, just a little bit further south, where another one of the great characters of recent years in Latin America, La Señora Presidenta Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, as I understand, she's had 4 indictments against her, Fausta. How serious is all of this? And how serious are they really going to take this? I mean, is she really in trouble, Fausta, or is this just another political show for the world to watch, Fausta? Well,
she is in trouble, and what happened was I saw the headline, which it says Argentina ex-president Cristina Kirchner charged with money laundering, and that was last week. I thought it was an old story because you know how sometimes on your news feed old stories come up again, and you read them and you say, well, I already covered that. Not this time. This is a new indictment, also on bribery charges. Her passport was taken away from her, so I guess she's not going to be visiting Pope Francis anytime soon, the way she used to during the elections in Argentina a couple of years ago. But the charge includes money laundering in real estate ventures, and apparently she had 14 houses she never declared to the anti-corruption authorities or the tax authorities. And, when you're sitting there, you read this and you go, well, how did she manage that? Could she have been paying off people while she's doing this? Do you know what I mean? So,
yeah.
Also,
her children are part of the indictment, too. But Fausta, her children are also part of the indictment. I mean, the only one who isn't indicted here is her husband, and that's because her husband's dead. But I mean, everybody in the family seems to be under the threat of an indictment. I mean, I read something about hotels and a public construction project, I guess down in Santa Cruz province in the south of Argentina. I think that's correct, Santa Cruz. I mean, it's just amazing to me. There's so much that I wonder if they're going to be able to get her on anything because she's apparently guilty of so many things, Fausta.
Well, in this particular indictment that showed up last week, her children, Florencia and Maximo, were indicted, and Maximo is still a member of Congress. Now, additionally, Cristóbal López and Lázaro Báez were also indicted, and they're being prosecuted as the head of the company who owned these hotels in Santa Cruz. And that part of the investigation is what turned up these 14 other houses. Now, we can't forget that she has pending charges for ordering Argentina's central bank to start trading derivatives illegally, which cost the country $5.5 billion, and those charges are not going away. Now, I do not know where this is going to end. I do not know if she's even going to serve time because of the political baggage that the Peronistas carry in the country, and that carries a lot of weight. So, but it's amazing that she keeps turning up like a bad penny in these cases.
Well, she's tweeting too, so we at least can hear her feelings because she tweets, which is another. I guess that's what everybody seems to be doing these days. Even Hillary Clinton is tweeting now, which is I guess that we can hold Donald Trump responsible for that because everybody's tweeting. Well, Fausta, one big story of the week, and I want to spend a little bit of time on this, is Venezuela, where there's three big things happening there. It seems like everybody's marching. I have friends in Venezuela on Facebook, and they keep posting stuff down there about the marches, and not necessarily even in Caracas, but in some of the outlying areas. One of my friends is from a town, a couple of hours from Venezuela, and they're pretty busy marching there in confrontations with the authorities. Maduro took a trip to Cuba and met with Raúl Castro, and then of course an opposition leader will not be allowed to run for political office. So those three things are happening down in Venezuela. I assume maybe other things in the last 24 hours that have happened too. But let's talk about the marches. How significant do you think these marches are, Fausta? At least on a visual sense, they're pretty significant.
Well, they are significant. They are all over the place, and there are large marches. What's different this time is that they have continued. The violence has been such that I believe there are over 200 injured, and last count were 3 dead for facing with the police. Now, I don't know whether Maduro is going to be paying any attention to this. He went to Cuba to get some advice from Raúl, of course, and support from other ALBA countries such as Bolivia and Ecuador and so on, because the ALBA countries were having a meeting in Cuba over the weekend. But when he came back, he was pelted with, I don't know if it was eggs, because I don't know that there were enough eggs in Venezuela for people to be wasting chicken eggs, but he certainly was pelted by a very angry crowd that hit him with whatever it was they were throwing at him. I do not know what the effect is going to be. I know that Enrique Capriles was banned from running for office, which means, he was banned from holding public office, which means that he cannot run for any elective office for the next 15 years. Whether the Venezuelans are going to be effective with this, I couldn't tell you, because as you and I know, they have had demonstrations, very significant demonstrations for many years, and all that has happened is that Maduro goes his merry way doing whatever Cuba tells him to do. So it's a horrible situation. The country is starving, and they are in very great need. There's talk about humanitarian help to Venezuela, and I'm sorry to say I'm against it. I think the government should be held accountable, and the only way that it's going to be held accountable is by showing exactly the effect that their policies have to do. Because once you start injecting foreign aid and ameliorating the effects of this communism that they have implanted into the country, everything is going to be happy for Maduro, who will say, well, it's all the Americans' fault, as he's already saying, without having any consequences for his actions or the actions of the government, I should say.
Right. Let me ask you a question about Capriles. On what grounds was he denied running for office? I mean, usually I suppose like here in the United States, if you're a criminal or something, you cannot vote, and maybe there's a limitation for running for office too. I'm not familiar with that. But on what grounds was Capriles, or what was the grounds for saying that he could not run for office? I never really understood that.
Essentially, he said that Capriles is trying to overthrow the government. The charges are, see, the thing is, you and I are thinking in terms of charges that would be holding up in court. In Venezuela, that's not the case anymore. So, for instance, and this is from the Wall Street Journal, the move against Mr. Capriles comes after Vice President Tarek El Aissami blasted him on Thursday for leading anti-government protests that led to clashes between police and demonstrators earlier that day. Mr. Aissami called the protesters terrorists and compared them to coup plotters who briefly overthrew Hugo Chavez 15 years ago. And that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, so it's a political vendetta. It's not a charge that would hold. Yeah, it's not a charge that would hold up in any court of law. It's just a purely political vendetta, and that just makes the situation in Venezuela that much worse. Well, Fausta, I don't recall that we ever did a show with so much information in 1 week. It kind of makes me wonder what's going to happen next week with Semana Santa. Maybe it won't be so bad next week, but we can expect, I suppose, a lot more happening next week. Is there anything that we missed? I have a paper here in front of me that has all kinds of stories. Did I miss anything from the week, Fausta? We touched on Mexico, Ecuador, Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela. Did I miss anything?
Well, in Salvador, which is another country.
Oh, yes.
That is very heavily involved in organized crime, particularly drug trade, the Attorney General's office arrested a guy named Jose Adán Salazar Umaña. And alias is Chepe Diablo, not Chapo, Chepe Diablo. And he is allegedly the leader of the Texas PEXIS cartel, which is the most important money laundering and drug trafficking organization in the country. And apparently, he is linked to the current vice president, whose name is Oscar Ortiz, because some of the companies that Oscar Ortiz was involved with were used by the Texas cartel to evade taxes or launder money that came from illegal activities. So Inside Crime has a very detailed report, and I very strongly recommend people read Inside Crime for more information on organized crime in Latin America. But according to the Inside Crime report, the current vice president, Oscar Ortiz, was allegedly laundering money through some of his real estate transactions that go back 17 years to 2000.
Wow. So I'm going to have to write a post about it. What's his name? El Chepe Diablo? El Diablo Chepe?
Chepe Diablo.
Wow. Fausta, the best way to conclude this week would be to recommend to Kate del Castillo or the producers of that new show that they should change the title. Instead of Ingobernable, they should call her La Chapa. And that should be the title of the new series. I just think that might be a better title for given her own exposure to the one and only El Chapo. But another crazy week in Latin America, Fausta. But I want to thank you, as always, for being a part of the show and for bringing us so much information through Fausta's blog. You do an absolutely wonderful job as the editor of that great blog. So I want to thank you, and I know a lot of people love what you do, and I know I speak for many who say thank you for the great and informative work that you do, and happy Viernes Santo and happy Easter on Sunday, and I hope that you and your family have a good weekend and enjoy yourselves, and we get ready for next time, Fausta. Hopefully we won't have as much to talk about, but hey, if we do, we'll do it again, Fausta.
Thank you, Silvio. You're too kind. And it's always a pleasure and honor, and happy Easter.
Same to you, Fausta. Happy Easter to you and to your family. Well, that's going to do it, folks. Thank you for listening. If you're listening to the second part of our show through YouTube, thank you for that, and thank you for having listened to the first part. And we'll update more on this YouTube project. I think I'm excited about it. It's a different way of presenting the show, but it is a very good way to do it. Thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas.